From weathered abodes surrounded in sprawling gardens where chilling specters are observed roaming under the moonlight, to historic plantation homes whose halls are stalked by the restless ghosts of past owners and of those formerly enslaved on site. Are you ready to explore our fourth list of some of the most haunted mansions in the United States? Number 5. The Lake Mansion Arts and Culture Center. The Lake Mansion Arts and Culture Center, located off of Court Street in Reno, Nevada, is a historic house recognized for its ownership under one Myron Lake, one of the timeless city's actual founders. Historically, in 1877, the abode was first constructed under W.J. Marsh at the corner of what was, at the time, Virginia and California streets, and in 1879, it would be purchased by Myron Lake, who, after his toll bridge over the Truckee earned the early local settlement the name of Lakes Crossing, was actually widely considered the founder of Reno. Following Myron's divorce from his wife Jane in 1881 and his subsequent passing in 1884, ownership of the property was inherited by Jane and their son Charlie, and in 1971, to avoid demolition under the construction of a new bank, Lake Mansion was moved adjacent to the convention center to just off of South Virginia Street. Years following, on July 11th of 2004, the 40-ton mansion was moved yet again 3.1 miles up Virginia Street to its current location. In the present, the abode is owned under the Arts for All Nevada, formerly VSA Arts of Nevada, which continues to offer workshops and art camps for all ages to the public, alongside touring options of the restored premises. Fitting the bill of a classic haunted mansion, this prestigious campus is rumored to be inhabited, quite simply, by the ghost of Myron Lake himself, who it's said purchased the home in hopes of winning back his wife and son, only to lose it all. A handful of reports detail doors that open and close on their own, lights that turn on and off by themselves, and objects sighted moving inexplicably, while several informal investigations have yielded chilling EVPs and disembodied footsteps captured in recordings, high EMF levels, and shadowy silhouettes captured on video. Lastly, many who have braved the Lake Mansion Arts and Culture Center have described run-ins with the specter of a man in 19th century clothing, who often appears lost, distraught, or confused, that is suspected to be the manifestation of poor Myron himself. Number 4. The Sonnenberg Gardens and Mansion State Historic Park. The Sonnenberg Gardens and Mansion State Historic Park, located off of Charlotte Street in Canandaigua, New York, is a 50-acre state park expanse that once acted as the summer property of one Frederick Ferris Thompson, a prominent New York City banker, and his wife Mary Clark Thompson, daughter to Myron Holly Clark, who actually acted as governor of the state in 1855. Historically, the Thompsons would purchase the Sonnenberg property in 1863 and would retain its Germanic moniker, which translated to Sunny Hill, and from 1885 to 1887, they would replace the original farmhouse-styled structure with an impressive Queen Anne-styled mansion, complete with a 100-acre farm to its east. From 1902 to 1919, Sonnenberg's sweeping gardens were designed and landscaped, and were initially composed of 9 different sections, all in a variety of styles. And following Mary Clark Thompson's passing in 1923, in 1931, the property was purchased by the federal government, who would construct what now acts as the Canandaigua VA Medical Center on the aforementioned farmscape, while utilizing the old mansion to house its doctors, nurses, and their families. In 1972, the property was acquired by a local non-profit who'd set to work refurbing the expanse, and a year later, in 1973, it was opened up to the public, with all 9 of its gardens restored and touring options available. In the present, in addition to the mansion, its gardens, and the like, Sonnenberg also hosts a cafe within its gardener's house, and the Finger Lakes Wine Center within its bay house, which offers a range of vino for tasting and purchase alongside a gift shop. According to local legend, Sonnenberg is haunted by the spirits of its former owners and by those who love the property and life, with employees, tour guides, and guests to its bounds reporting strange misty forms that drift about, disembodied voices and footsteps from empty rooms, and shadowy figures that move unnaturally across the walls. Possibly the most popular legend surrounding the site tells that Mrs. Thompson actually died on the veranda, and those who have braved it, especially after dark, have reported a ghostly whispering and more rare encounters with her spectral form, usually in the summer months. Lastly, an ominous woman in black has been sighted stalking about mansion grounds, and while some claim this is also Mrs. Thompson just in another manifestation, others have theorized this entity may actually be a spirit of someone related to the VA medical center, either an employee or a family member who lost a loved one. Number 3. The Getty Villa. The Getty Villa, located off of Pacific Coast Highway in the Pacific Palisades neighborhood of Los Angeles, California, is a 64-acre property turned educational venue that's museum center, which acts as one of 2 of the J. Paul Getty campuses, is dedicated to the interpretation and study of the ancient Greek, Roman, and Etrurian arts. Historically, following the conclusion of World War II, oil tycoon John Paul Getty Sr. would make purchase of ranch lands that had once acted as part of Rancho Boca de Santa Monica, an earlier 19th century Mexican land grant that had spanned 6,656 acres, his portion of which he planned to develop as a retreat where he and his 5th wife, Theodora, could ride horses, and from which he could display his budding art collection. In 1954, Getty would design an art gallery adjacent to his home, and realizing he was almost out of land space, decided to establish the Getty Villa just downhill from said gallery. Getty Villa would officially open in 1974, but sadly was never visited by Getty himself, who passed on in 1976, and following his death and an inheritance of $661 million, the museum would launch plans for the larger Getty Center, which would be placed in nearby Brentwood. In 1997, the Getty Villa was closed for a time for renovations, while pieces of its collection were transported to the Getty Center for display, and on January 28th of 2006, the villa would reopen featuring Roman-style architecture and sweeping gardens. Most recently, the Getty Village would close to the public in March of 2020. However, as of June 5th of 2021, it would reopen its doors, once again offering its impressive collection of over 44,000 Greek, Roman, and Etruscan antiquities. Not surprisingly, a multitude of local legends tell the whole of Villa grounds are haunted by spirits attached to its extensive collection, and both staff and visitors to the site have reported objects sighted moving on their own, alarms that sound without cause, and locked displays found completely rearranged overnight. An assortment of figures and statues within the museum have been rumored to move, twist, and follow visitors with their eyes, while near various headstones, grave markers, and memorial or death-related objects, some have reported feeling an inexplicable chill, as if the warmth is being siphoned from their bodies. Also reported across the whole of the Getty Villa are lights that flick from on to off by themselves, doors that open and close on their own, orbs and spectral silhouettes captured in photography and in security footage, and the constant feelings of being watched, followed, or even of being brushed up against by someone unseen. Lastly, Jean Paul Getty Sr. is actually buried on the property, though his grave remains inaccessible to the public, and staff members who have neared it have reported sighting his entity wandering about the museum after close, always keeping a distance. Number 2. The Monmouth Historic Inn and Garden. The Monmouth Historic Inn and Garden, located off of John A. Quitman Boulevard in NATCHEZ, Mississippi, is a historic abode turned prominent lodging. That structure is recognized as one of the city's grandest Greek Revival mansions, and its bounds are well renowned for acting as former home to Mississippian Governor John A. Quitman, whose deeds through the Mexican-American War verged on legendary. Historically, construction of this abode was launched in 1818 under John Hankinson. However, following the deaths of both Hankinson and his wife in 1826, it was sold to John Anthony Quitman, who, in 1853, would issue a series of extensive renovations. John would pass on in 1858, and his wife would follow him into death just a year later, after which the property was left to their children. And in 1862, when the Union launched attacks on NATCHEZ through the Civil War, most of the formerly enslaved individuals on their lands took the opportunity to flee. In 1863, the abode was occupied by Union forces who stripped it bare of its valuables, and though they initially intended to burn the estate to the ground, it was saved by daughters of the Quitmans who pledged their loyalty to a new, more just United States. The property would remain in the hands of the Quitmans until 1924, after which it would change hands several times before, in 1978, landing under the ownership of Lanny and Ronald Riches out of Los Angeles, California, who would go on to restore the expanse to its original grandeur. Most recently, in 1982, after archaeological efforts unearthed the remains of 2 slave quarters, reconstructions of these buildings were erected on their original sites. The Monmouth Historic Inn and Garden remains open into the present, offering 30 total guest rooms and suites, a fine dining restaurant, and the more casual Quitman Lounge, alongside tours of the house and grounds. The whole of this weathered site has long been surrounded in local legends and tales of the otherworldly, one of the most popular of which intertwines with history to tell of how in February of 1857, while visiting DC, John Quitman fell ill, and according to reports of the era, by the time he'd made it back to Monmouth, his family was actually shocked by how quickly he'd declined. While it's been widely accepted that Quitman's illness was a naturally occurring one, likely national hotel disease, others weren't so certain, and whispers of poison issued under abolitionist orders drifted on the winds. Quitman would die in 1858 within Monmouth, and many claim his spirit remains, with both staff and visitors reporting orbs and strange forms captured in photography, doors that open and close briskly as if someone unseen is passing through them, and instances of personal possessions that go missing only to turn up later in strange places. According to lore, Quitman would first begin making his presence known in 1977, after the purchase of his former estate under the Riches, and during which time restoration workers would describe feeling surrounded by a strong presence, disembodied stomping heard at all hours, and even encounters with the manifestation of Quitman himself, who always appeared with a stern look on his face, as he seemingly observed cheery laborers with the utmost disdain. Lastly, several more recent and perturbing accounts tell of guests who have been awakened in the middle of the night to a male silhouette, likely Quitman, within their locked rooms, looming over their beds. Number 1. The Pierre Menard Home State Historic Site. Nicknamed the Mount Vernon of the West, the Pierre Menard Home State Historic Site is a historic abode located off Kaskaskia Street out of Ellis Grove, Illinois, that stands as a last remaining testament to the very first capital which originally stood in its place. Circa 1802, this property was purchased under Illinois' first Lieutenant Governor, Pierre Menard, who set to work constructing a home later the same year, after which he would continue to expand upon his new abode until 1815, when he finally considered it finished at the state in which it remains to this day. Sadly, because Menard held enslaved individuals prior to Illinois' statehood in 1818, he was actually legally permitted to retain an official ownership. By 1820, this dirty ownership included 13 poor souls, and by 1833, that number had risen to 22. Menard would die in 1844, after which the enslaved individuals whose rights he'd clung to so adamantly were actually passed on to his family, who would retain state-approved ownership until Illinois finally decided to abolish slavery in 1848. In 1929, the aged abode was purchased by the state and declared a state historic site. In 1970, it was placed on the National Register of Historic Places and designated as a National Historic Landmark. And in 1998, archaeological efforts were launched at uncovering the remains of slave cabins in an attempt to document what can be salvaged regarding the lives of the many whose years were stolen by the Menard family. The Pierre Menard Home State Historic Site remains open into the present, though as of the spring of 2022, it has closed its doors for a time due to staffing shortages, and offers viewings of the main home, a stone kitchen, the reconstruction of a brick smokehouse, a stone spring house, and a pot-sur-sol privy, or post-on-a-sill outhouse. Not surprisingly, the whole of the property is rumored to be haunted by the restless souls of those enslaved who perished on its bounds, as well as by the spirits of those tied to the Menard family, and those frequenting it have reported lights that flicker or turn on and off by themselves, disembodied voices in full conversation heard from empty spaces, and footsteps that emanate from vacant halls, even when the building is supposed to be empty. Following the loss of his spouse, Therese Godin, in 1804, Pierre would remarry just 2 years later, and legend tells this quick rebound likely left his late wife's spirit restless. A handful of reports detail encounters with an angry female presence bearing her likeness that leaves cold patches in its wake as it storms about the house. Most chillingly, Pierre and Therese had 4 children before their death, and several children of subsequent owners documented waking in the middle of the night to find a female entity over their beds, thought also to be Therese, that seemed to have been watching them quietly as they slept. Several informal investigations of the expanse have yielded high EMF levels, crystal clear EVPs, malfunctions with well-maintained equipment, and extreme temperature fluctuations, while other accounts have told of phantom wafts of foods cooking or of old-timey perfumes, as well as encounters with ghostly figures in old-fashioned clothing and with the manifestations of those formerly enslaved. Lastly, as mentioned previously, Pierre would retire to this home in 1844, where he'd die at the age of 77, and after which his remains were buried at Fort Kaskaskia. His spirit is said to remain throughout his home from life, and several have viewed his ghost wandering the grounds, or walking up and down the front steps in the evening. Taking its fascinating history into account, and coupling it with such a range of purported chilling hauntings and associated local legends, we felt the Pierre Menard Home State Historic Site was the perfect choice as this list's most haunted mansion in the United States. Thanks for joining us on our 4th list of some of the most haunted mansions in the United States. If you enjoyed our histories and ghost stories, subscribe to our channel, like this upload, and share us with anyone you think deserves a good scare. We'll see you next time.